Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Espaillat, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Tonight I rise to honor the life and legacy of Congressmember Raúl Grijalva. Raúl Grijalva passed away peacefully on March 13 of this year, surrounded by his wife and 3 daughters. Born in Tucson, Arizona on February 19, 1948, he was raised in a close-knit community with his sisters, Lydia and Norma. A proud Sunnyside High graduate, he met and married the love of his life, Ramona Garduño, in 1971. Together they raised 3 daughters, Adelita, Raquel, and Marisa, and built a life rooted in service and activism. His parents instilled in him the values of hard work and perseverance and giving back to the community. He dedicated over 50 years to public service, beginning with the Tucson Unified School Board in 1974 and later serving on the Pima County Board of Supervisors. As a U.S. Congressman for 22 years, he championed education, environmental protection, social justice, and Native American sovereignty. His leadership helped secure the 2023 designation of the Bach Navajo Itacuveni National Monument, protecting nearly 1 million acres of tribal land. Known as the most liberal member of Congress, he never wavered in his fight for justice and equality. He never shied away from that dignified title. A devoted husband, father, and tata, he cherished his family and treasured time with his grandchildren. He had a sharp wit about him, a deep love for music and books, and a knack for doodling during meetings. Many of us saw him do his artwork in some of our committee meetings. His staff and volunteers, the Grijalvistas, were like family, standing by him in his lifelong pursuit of progress. Mr. Speaker, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is standing firm with his family during this time of sorrow and need. I know that they're watching this proceeding, Mr. Speaker. I want to salute them and tell them that we love them and we stand with them. Raúl Grijalva's unwavering commitment to justice and his community will continue to inspire generations to come. Since coming to Congress and joining the Natural Resources Committee, Raúl Grijalva was one of the most outspoken champions for environmental justice, public lands, indigenous rights, climate change, and corporate accountability. He was a visionary leader both on the committee and as co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, amplifying the voices of historically silenced communities. From Louisiana's Cancer Alley to Alaskan Native communities in the Arctic, he fought for those most impacted by environmental harm. Under his chairmanship in the 117th Congress, the Natural Resources Committee signed 149 natural resources bill into law. In the minority, he proved that aggressive and effective oversight was possible, holding the Trump administration accountable and exposing corruption. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Joaquin Castro.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an honor to be with you tonight and with members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, with our Democratic leader as well, to celebrate and remember a man who made a difference, Raúl Grijalva. He never forgot where he came from, but just as importantly, he never forgot why he came. He was somebody who lent a voice to the vulnerable, to the folks who had been discarded and forgotten. He was a man of his community. I've often thought in public service, as we meet all the people that represent and serve the districts that they do. I served 10 years in Austin in the state legislature, and now in my 13th year here. I always wonder how closely each person represents the average person walking down the street in their district. Raúl Grijalva was that every person. And to me, that's one of the biggest compliments that you can pay, not only to the people who sent him here, but also to him. He left the same way he came in, a man of principle who stood up for what he believed, who fought for the people that he represented, and always spoke truth to power. He was a legend of Mexican-American activism, known across the country for protecting our national parks, the environment, fighting for early childhood education and higher education, and uplifting immigrant and marginalized communities. He was also, as all of us know, a kind and brilliant man. He had a kind heart, but a fierce spirit. He was a fearless voice for Arizonans and for all Americans. Raul, you will be missed. My condolences to his family and to his community. I yield back, Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from New York, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the distinguished chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, my good friend Adriano Espaillat, for his leadership and for convening us on the floor today in honor of an iconic, heroic, trailblazing member of Congress, Raúl Grijalva. It's an honor for all of us to have the opportunity to serve with Chairman Grijalva. He was a mentor to many. His principled leadership was a North Star for so many in this Congress, a leading progressive voice throughout the years, but a friend to all. We know that throughout his time, throughout his journey in public service, a journey that led to him working year after year, decade after decade, century into century, laboring in the vineyards of his community and ultimately the country to make a difference in the lives of others who might otherwise have been left behind. An iconic Mexican-American leader, an iconic American leader. We're also appreciative of his life, of his leadership, and of the tremendous legacy that Congressman Raúl Grijalva leaves behind. Congressman Grijalva, throughout the years, did many things, from community organizer to school board member to county supervisor to member of Congress to chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. Through that journey, year after year, decade after decade, century into century, Raúl Grijalva held many titles. His North Star remained the same. He was a defender of the disenfranchised, a voice for the voiceless, a climate champion, and a powerful, profound, principled purposeful, progressive public servant who made a difference in the lives of so many people. We're going to miss Raúl Grijalva, miss his wisdom, miss his insight, miss his idealism, miss his laughter and his sense of humor. But we're better off for having had the opportunity to serve with him as individuals. Most importantly, his community is better off, the state of Arizona is better off, the Congress is better off, and the country is better off because of Raúl Grijalva and his incredible leadership. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman, 2 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, Jesus Chuy Garcia.
Thank you, Chairman Espaillat. I rise this evening to pay tribute to a giant who represented the state of Arizona, all the people of his district, but who also helped advance the well-being of our nation. Arizona has lost a giant, and I lost a dear friend. Raúl Grijalva and I both started our careers as community advocates and organizers. We shared a passion for justice and equality of our communities. We both came from working class families and proud of our Mexican roots, and we both enjoyed a good laugh and a good mariachi. So it was just natural that we would become friends since I arrived in the House over 6 years ago. As chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, he fought for strong environmental protections and authored the Environmental Justice for All Act to empower people to protect their communities. He wanted a cleaner, safer, and more just future for all our children. He was also a staunch defender of tribal sovereignty and workers' rights. When he was chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, he asked me to serve for one term as his vice chair. During that time, it was that Illinois helped facilitate an act in the state of Illinois that required federal cooperation in that regard, as we helped facilitate the recognition of Illinois' first prairie band of Potawatomi peoples in the state of Illinois, which just last week resulted in the transfer of over 1,500 acres to those Native Americans, original inhabitants of the land in Illinois. I was honored to work with him to help the people of Puerto Rico receive the long-promised assistance they needed after Hurricane Maria. Raúl believed that our country's strength is rooted in our immigrant heritage and worked tirelessly to protect immigrant families and refugees, whether trying to pass the Dream and Promise Act, treating immigrants with dignity, or stopping the construction of an ineffective and environmentally damaging border wall. Raúl never gave up. One of Raúl's favorite songs was El Rey. It means the king. And in particular, the line that says, no hay que llegar primero, pero hay que saber llegar, which means it's not only about getting there first, but about how you get there and what you do along the way, if I may add. I think this phrase perfectly describes the tenacity of everything that Raúl Grijalva did and stood for. Raúl was a loving father, a husband, and a loyal friend. His kindness and dedication will be sorely missed in the halls of Congress. Tonight, we pay a tribute and we say thank you for everything that you contributed to advancing the well-being of people across our land. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Jimmy Gomez.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. I didn't get to go to Congressman Grijalva's funeral last week because I had to be here for a committee hearing. And he wanted me, if he was around, he would have wanted me to stay here and be at that hearing and give them hell. And that's exactly what I did. And he would have been extremely proud of that. But I really want to talk to you about who I met when I was just out of grad school. I was a legislative assistant for Hilda Solis. I was the lowest ranking staffer on her team. And I got to meet Raúl Grijalva when he was a member of Congress and I was just a legislative assistant. And to an extent, I walked into the office, I would kind of go wandering around the halls and go and say hello and try to go and just to see who I can become friends with. And I met his chief of staff at that time, and she goes, "Hey, why don't you come in and say hello to the congressman out of the blue?" And they pulled me into the office. I was just a kid who has been here a few months, and Raul sat with me and just had a conversation of who I was, why I was fighting for my community, why did I want to be in this business. And that interaction really did stick with me for a number of years. And that's because I didn't have a title. I was not anybody special. I wasn't anybody in particular. I was a kid that wandered into his office and tried to get a meeting with him because, I said, why not? Why not? He's a member of Congress, but he comes from a similar background. His dad was a bracero. My dad was a bracero. That means that they worked in the fields here in the United States. And I think we're maybe 2 or 3 of the sons of braceros that became members of Congress. But it really shows who he is. And he's a guy that he will treat you the same if you're the president, to a member of Congress, or to a staffer, or to somebody who works in the fields. And that says more about Raúl Grijalva than, I believe, any piece of legislation he's ever passed. And when I got here, he remembered me as that kid that often was probably a little bit too arrogant, a little bit too in a rush to move ahead, but that he helped get accustomed to the House of Representatives. So I was really bummed and sad when we heard the news that he passed away, even though we kind of all had a feeling it was a long time coming. He was pretty sick, but he was a guy that I think a lot of us just loved as family. And I think that's why you see so many people from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, from the other caucuses, members that went to his funeral, because he was just a great guy, somebody that you could have a glass of wine with, somebody that you can just go and hang out with. And I ended up hiring one of his staffers to be my first chief of staff, Bertha Guerrero, and she loved him to death, and she said that his office was like a family. So, Raul, you'll be missed. I know you have done great things, but it's really the people that you've touched over the years that will continue your legacy, especially your wife and your daughters. With that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, let me just highlight some of the great accomplishments of Raúl Grijalva, Congressman Raúl Grijalva. He championed full permanent funding for Land and Waters Conservation Fund, achieving its passage in the Great American Outdoors Act of 2020. He led the Donald McEachin Environmental Justice for All Act, the most comprehensive environmental justice legislation ever. His Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act laid the foundation for protecting coastal communities and promoting clean offshore energy. The RESPECT Act sought to codify tribal consultation standards and strengthening our nation-to-nation relationships. The Puerto Rico Status Act, which helped pass in the House, represented a historic step towards self-determination. I was also proud to work with him on several pieces of legislation, including legislation to provide student loan relief to teachers who specialize in teaching English language learners like myself as a kid, legislation to increase funding to English language learners preparation programs, and getting the GAO to study how schools identify English language learners with disabilities to ensure they have the right support behind them. He also secured the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, permanently authorizing the Land and Water Conservation Fund. His leadership helped pass major ocean and climate action provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act and other landmark legislation. He held the first congressional hearings on issues like missing and murdered indigenous women in Indian boarding schools. His work on the Puerto Rico Status Act helped advance the conversation on the island's political future. Raúl Grijalva's legacy is one of unwavering advocacy, principled leadership, and a deep commitment to justice. Raúl, no vas a hacer muchas falta, nunca te olvidaremos. We will never forget you, Raúl. Rest in power, hermano. His impact will be felt for generations. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the remaining part of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say